Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Millie Sievert and the Radioactive 5 titled Mona Lisa. And if we switch over to here, I am always cautious about track titles. For me, if I wasn't more familiar, I would have assumed that Mona Lisa was the artist and then Millie Sievert and the Radioactive 5 was the track, but I'm glad that I'm aware that it's the other way around. It's really good though. I think this, just to sort of like let you sort of fill you in, Millie Sievert and the Radioactive 5 is like a spin-off project of Enuminous and Archimedes. It's basically fictional and artificially intelligence generated, but it does sound quite realistic. And it's just like a fictional band that they've made up, you know. The story behind it, if I'm not mistaken, is we found her in 1912 when we played the Hippodrome in our infamous time travel concert and Time After Back to the Future, where she promptly stole our drummer and formed her own band. And apparently they think of her as their very own Tila O'Malley. And I adore the fact that they're trying to be this creative with music. It's going to be interesting to hear what Millie Sievert and the Radioactive 5 have for us today. It's a very long song. We're going to listen through it from start till finish. We're going to hear what we think. And just to show the art for it, we have it on the screen. The Mona Lisa. Let's go.
From some dire play that long ago had wound its way across cobblestone and battlefield, took a face from Hamlet's daughter.
That's crazy. Like, I could believe that.
All that bloom with watery dark lines, sunshine could have never healed. Yes, we took a face from Da Vinci's dream of life made easy by machine. Sight is all ablaze. We took those dark, no-color eyes of some nameless man who left this grass so long ago.
Nah, it's surreal that the guitars are sounding like that.
Rich, so elegant, all dismal red. The speakeasy parlor all gay and thick with smoke. Slowly avert your eyes, those eyes of love from who you see kneeling this Chandler floor. Our face we adore and adorn, and we'll never forget what it looked in its youth. Soon look again at the play and the scenes that keep changing, authors all on their own.
It sounds like an indie pop song. It's 7 minutes, as I mentioned again. I'm not averse to reviewing a track of that length. It will be interesting to hear how we flesh it out, but I also trust that we're going to be okay. These guys can handle long form.
Outrageous creatures, it's a big universe. Show me your face in that dire play you've been secretly writing, my friends. The one that is fevered and sorely bruised.
What are the lyrics like for this? There's quite a few. We're gonna have a read through those after this. Those synths are kind of surreal though.
Handwriting suffers and futures get broken. When I face a black page there. My handwriting suffers and futures get broken. Cut off when I face a black page there. Any lies are done off my hands.
How does it decide when to put the synths in? How does it decide, like, at that 2-minute mark, this is where we need to have the phasing synths in the background. This is how we need to do the backing vocals, etc. How does it decide that? Is it prompts or is it something else? I'm sincerely curious about that. That's a bit rough. So like I hate to be that guy, right? I understand again this is AI generated, they're figuring stuff out, and I think that it's a really great song so far. I think that it would have, I mean, this is me giving feedback to an AI potentially, right? It would have needed more space between that finish there in order for it to not be so blunt to transition. Up until that point, it felt like, it almost feels like this is a second track, if that makes sense.
Go had wound its way across cobblestone and battlefield. Took a face from Hamlet's daughter, all agloom with watery dark lines, sunshine could never heal. Yes, we took a face from Da Vinci's dream of life made easy by machine side is all ablaze. We took those dark no color eyes, this nameless man left this grass so long ago, and scenery so elegant, all dismal red, speakeasy powder organ thick with snow. Slowly avert your eyes, those eyes of love, you see milling the shadow floor.
It's wild, like, how they can create such a compelling vocal melody. This is how you know I'm invested in it. I don't often sort of like use the bad words, but like when something takes me by surprise, it legitimately does. So much can be accomplished by allowing ourselves to have a really catchy vocal melody. The words don't necessarily rhyme at the end of each line there. It's more sort of like sort of statements are being sung there, regardless of that. So it's maybe less poetic than when it's still poetry, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not like the typical, this is the thing, I do it today. This is the thing, I come out and play kind of stuff. You know, not that that's particularly interesting. Do you know what I mean, though? It's like we're sort of divorcing ourselves of that while still making a track which, if you weren't paying enough attention to the lyrics, you just vibe behind.
Face we adore and adorn, and we'll never forget what it looked in its hue. Soon look again, the play and the scenes that keep changing offers all on their own. Hymen was
Well, that's nice. That's satisfying. So we sort of like took 2 bars off there and went to the next movement.
only figures we had dreamed of, some outrageous creatures. It's a big universe. Show me your face in that dark clay. You've been secretly writing, my friends, the one that is feeling sorely blue.
Cool.
Or I'll see that young lady before me. What she has written before will suddenly vanish her, just like she planned.
So this is more sort of like synth and sort of more modern pop focused with the drums and everything like that. We had the synths at the start of the track. Was this what we were trying to sort of signal? Is with the guitars and everything, the more subtle movements, the indie focused stuff initially with the synths, they were going to move into an iteration like this?
I cannot deny that the outsides of heaven only put it in a special place deep in a bottle. My handwriting suffers and futures get broken when I face a black page, staring hypnotic slut. Cut off my hands if you think I'm endangering any life's about. Nose to see, my face is on fire. I place it on the wall, smoky and glow as it sits behind bulletproof glass.
It's actually a banger. Like, unapologetically, it actually does slap. I compare it to a lot of pop singles that I hear nowadays. You could easily imagine this being in a movie. Like, you know, the Greatest Showman or whatever it was. I don't know whether that's a compliment or an insult, depending on who you are. But I think that there's music like this, where the crowd singing and everything like that behind them, the backing vocals there, with the synths and bass. You could totally imagine this being a track on a movie like that. Those really starry keys.
In a bottle, my heart suffers and futures broken when I face a black page, staring My face is on fire. I place it on the wall, smoky and glows. It sits behind bulletproof glass.
What an interesting movement through this piece. What an interesting movement through this piece. It's like an iteration of the start, like the basic lyrics several times, and with different combinations of instruments behind it, the varying intensities there, and the vocals as well, change in stylings between. We're going to have a look through the lyrics really quickly, and then we're going to talk about this track more in the conclusion. So if I don't know if this is big enough for you guys. I just realized I can make them big like this, right? That's actually cool. I'm going to have to like zoom in the other video I've done, because I've done 2 reviews for Numinous and Archimedes today. One for one of their tracks, as well as one for Millie Sievert and the Radioactive 5. My handwriting suffers and futures get broken when I face a blank page, staring hypnotic slut. Cut off my hands if you think I'm endangering any lights, a damn. Knows the scene, my place is on fire. I place it on the wall, all smoky and glow, as it sits behind bulletproof. These are some interesting lyrics that we're trying to talk about we'll talk about this track more in the conclusion. Because welcome to my conclusion of this, or my review of this track from an act named Millie Sievert and the Radioactive 5 titled Mona Lisa. I assume this track is talking about the inspirations for the Mona Lisa themselves, the colors that they got for it, talking about like the dark eyes and everything like that, talking about like the inspiration required to be able to paint it in the first place, maybe talking about the person who painted it, and then also the fact that they put themselves on the wall, and it's like the inspiration for it effectively, and then the complications with that and the ins and outs of it. I'm not really sure what else to make of it. There's just a lot going on in there, and I think again, like I feel like I'd need sort of time outside of this review to sort of like have it like a go through it. But I think part of what's really fascinating about this track is that we continue to repeat those lyrics. We repeat them throughout with different sections, almost like we're showing, hey, this is what Millie Sievert can do in this part, and with this style of music. And with that, it's showing our flexibility stylistically to suit different genres that are popular. And it's almost like, how do I describe it? It's almost like we are saying to the listener here, hey, with this artificially generated, this intelligence that we've got here creating this music, it's basically very convincing now, and you can enjoy this, and it works, and it does here. I think that the first couple of minutes were quite convincing. I listened through that, I heard Millie singing, and it sounded like someone speaking their truth. It was a little bit fuzzy sounding. There wasn't as much sort of like clarity with the vocals as I wanted to hear with the words, but to be fair, we're still learning to generate them and stuff like that. It's getting more and more convincing. We had different patterns there. We had easily identifiable melodies that melded well and harmonized well with the guitars, the bass, guitars and other sort of more subtle instruments in the background there. But then when things rose up later on and we had the main vocals with the sort of choir and backings on the side there, it became more like sort of like a modern pop track. It went from this kind of folkish indie acoustic early stuff to moving straight up to a piece where it did justify itself quite well at 7 minutes. I think this is what I talk about when I say that if you have one theme, you kind of need to adjust it as you go through a piece like this, especially if it's long form. I was just having a think about it. I realized that this is just effectively their way of saying, this is what I'm capable of. You need to sort of accept that we can do a wide variety of genres and handle it. I think you need to make the most of the 7 minutes and establish a different idea. 3 minutes for one chord progressional bass line, sure. Not 7 though, it's too much of the same, regardless of the varying instrumental layers. What they did here with this, with the understanding that the vocals were quite well handled both in the mains and on the sides there, even though there were some parts where I think there was like kind of a blunt key change around that 2 to 3 minute mark that I wasn't a massive fan of. I do appreciate what we were trying to do in regards to the structuring of the track there. We had those lyrics repeated, and as I mentioned, again, I'm not going to iterate on it again, that like we had a different idea for each bit. It became more sort of samey as we went along. So you started introducing those synth parts in like the 2 to 3 minute mark, and they really became a focal point of the track there with bass coming in and drums as well after the key change there. So that kind of cemented it, and we were kind of in that place then. The drums continuing with the bass until the end there with the acoustics starting things out. Things being kind of low key and subtle there. we had a similar like Roman numeral-esque kind of chord progression there, where even though we had key changes, we still followed a similar movement there harmonically there, and that helped to tie it together. But again, it was different intensities, varying sort of tones and textures there. But at the end of the track, it was far more full on than it was at the beginning. It was full on, full bore with like the different sort of like resonant reverb key bits, occasionally with the huge sounding synths and the bass and the drums. It was a big journey that we went on here, telling the story again and again and iterating on it, but allowing different angles. I think that if I talk about a few of the instruments I really appreciated, I kind of enjoyed the tone of the guitars there. They were relatively pretty, but they weren't trying to take too much attention away from Millie Sievert there. I appreciate the fact that we were trying to not just strum chords, but we were also sort of arpeggiating and finger styling them as well. We had some interesting sort of maybe some ninths or something like that, which was kind of unusual, but I kind of appreciate that. I should also note, it's not just Millie Sievert, it's also like, I don't know how to describe it. There's like a focused kind of backing style where like you do call and responses with the main there, and they overlap. And it made it sound more and more like the genre. Like we really understood the intricacies of making it sound like a certain style there, whilst making it Millie Sievert's own. And it was really palatable. And I think that that's all we really needed early on, was a bit of complexity to the guitar parts to sort of go alongside the vocals of the main and sides there. But things to sort of shift occasionally as we moved into the synths there, again with the bass and drums moving on. The guitars were nice and palatable for most of it. The basses, when after per key change, they behaved really neatly with whatever bass lines or root notes were in the chord progressions there. We built them up and we almost like made them sound poignant, and it sounded epic because of the tightness in that low end. This was further accelerated by some of the synth parts there, the synth pads and everything we had, as well as some occasional leads. They were a lot more colorful in mid to high range and a bit more resonant than the guitars, or at least they were a bit more sort of like full-bodied. And what I enjoy about that is that it just carried it for 4 minutes. It was so different to what we had with the guitars that it felt, again, like a completely new track. Again, it was a bit too blunt for me with the key change. I think we should have had a bit of a break there, but it's okay. We're learning in terms of the AI anyways. And ultimately, I just think it was still kind of dope that we managed to find a way to change the motif and was still keeping the actual lyrics kind of relevant to that. There was a lot of complexity within the story there, I suppose, but ultimately the feel of it, the chord progressions used and everything like that, they were kind of almost, I think when the drums came in, they had a great punch to it, and it was wonderful how they were leveled in the mix there, as well as sort of like phrased around the stereo field there. The kick, snares, and cymbal parts came through really elegantly, and were a nice way of sort of like filling and completing the track. At that point, it seemed like we really ramped things up with that sort of like snare kick fill thing going into it. It was very satisfying, and I think honestly it feels like a ballad format in part because of that, because the bass drums didn't come in straight away. It was intriguing enough for the diversity within the guitar riffs to not need to have additional elements for the first couple of minutes there, and I think that it was really well handled. The layering as well, with the occasional keys later on in mid to hyper resonance there with reverb tails and stuff kind of simmering in the ether, with very subtle builds and like the amount or like the style of, maybe there were more synth lead layers or synth layers as we went further on. It's really cool because it was very subtle how we grew. Remains consistent throughout there. It's just trying to build to like the fire has continued to burn, sort of like overwhelm us. It's almost like the synths are sort of swallowing us whole, if that makes sense. It's like the passion and the energy there is becoming more and more violent as we sort of escalate and accelerate towards that inevitable conclusion. And then definitely, it's just a piece where it's really exciting for the future of AI music. I think that if we can make more long form as compatible as this, I think it's going to be really great. And it also shows, I think, that you don't need to have too many lead layers sort of like alternate to the vocals in order to make it sort of practicable. I think that honestly, to be fair, it might have, I don't know if I would have liked it with lead layers. I feel like the reason that they didn't was because it might have been extraneous. It might have been just like superfluous. We didn't need to overcomplicate the composition there, because again, the exercise was around creating different ways of communicating that poetry there in different sort of styles and environments. And I think ultimately, it was open enough to not commit to a specific mood, but to allow a sense of mystery with the lyrics. I'll leave it at that. There was some interesting sus and ninth chords with the majors and minors there that didn't overcommit to a specific sort of like direction, and that was a smart move in the end. Across the board there was the sounds that made it interesting. But the studio recording, mixing, and mastering, I think it was tight. You could hear the vocal parts, both the mains, the sides, and then the sort of like choir vocals later on, as well as the guitars, the bass, the drums, the synths, and the keys and stuff like that neatly in the mix. I can't imagine how they would sort of like not do it well. I imagine that the AI is sort of calculating the actual, it's doing what it does with like AI mastering, for example, where it's actually quote unquote feeling the energy of the waveforms and leveling appropriately, how it's been taught to do so. So I think at least on the plus side with AI mixing and mastering, it's going to be pretty good because it kind of knows how to read it in a different way than maybe a lot of people do. So I think ultimately it's satisfying in that regard. Things are nice and wide in the stereo field with various vocal parts a bit more further out, as well as some of the guitar and synthy bits surrounding you in the headphones. Things were nicely niched in the frequency spectrum without any sort of like weird resonant frequencies. There was dynamic range, things were not the same loudest all the time. It was a lot quieter at the start overall than it was later on. I think that's great for development. But it was still nice and loud without pumping, so the bus compression and limiting were handled. I mean, effectively, this is just quite a positive review for this track from Millie Sievert and the Radioactive 5 titled Mona Lisa, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via their various social medias and SoundCloud page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world, and I will catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.